It's that food is celebration, right? So it doesn't matter what country, what culture, there's the micronutrients, there's the bioactive, it's the way that the food's structured. So I think it's important for industry to elevate that science, use that latest science of nutrition, because we're only using macronutrients and salt and sodium. It's not us versus them. I think we're all part of the same food system and we got to work together. And Harvard also published recently more than 15 micronutrient shortfalls globally. It's a huge silent health crisis. Big opportunity for industry is in personalized nutrition. Exactly, without creating guilt, because the relationship that we have with food is the longest relationship we'll ever have.
Yeah.
It starts in utero and it ends when you die.
Estamos de vuelta en The FOODiQ Podcast. Mi nombre es Ingrid Cubas y en esta ocasión nos acompaña Flávia Fayet-Moore. Welcome to
Thank
The
you.
FOODiQ Podcast. We're very thrilled to have you here with us today. We know that you had recently a conference at El Summit, our main auditorium here, but we want to know, first of all, now that you have worked in different countries and contexts, can you please tell us what the special nutritionists have taught you about the food seen from outside the planet?
Yes, actually, it's quite a lot. So in food and nutrition, we know that food provides nutrition, like it's what we need every day to live and survive. But when you take food and you put it into space, it's where you realize that the other components of food, like the fact that it gives us purpose, it helps with the crew morale and well-being, it makes them more resilient, it helps them feel like home and remember planet Earth. So all those things are super important. So in space, nutrition is super important because we got to make sure that every nutrient they need is in the food. But we also know that all the psychological effect of food, how food is culture, it connects people, is just as important than the nutrition that the food provides, which is really nice because having lived in so many countries and seeing the cultures, food culture is really important. And the way that we see food and the way food becomes part of a culture is different depending which country that you're in and where you come from.
Besides of that differences, what have you found that is common in different places that never gets to change no matter where you are?
It's that food is celebration, right? So it doesn't matter what country, what culture, food, any special occasion, anything that we do as humans to socialize always has to have food. And food is so fundamentally part of society and our culture. And sometimes when we create labels and we put the nutrient facts on it, we forget that that context where food is almost as important, or if not more important, than the actual nutrition that's on the label.
We have been struggling a lot with that. We know that it's hard for the food manufacturers to get to integrate that into their development of products. But how can they get to have an equilibrium between the healthy situations and innovation, but also with competitivity in this situation?
I think what I spoke about in my keynote is really that we need industry to step out of this reductionist approach where we see the complexity of food to single metrics, single numbers that are purely macronutrient focused. Mm-hmm. So when we put labels on food, we say that food is just fat, sugar, sodium, carbohydrate, and calories. But we know that food in nutrition is so much more. There's the micronutrients, there's the bioactive, it's the way that the food's structured, there's the synergy with everything with each other. So I think it's important for industry to elevate that science, use that latest science of nutrition, because we're only using macronutrients and salt and sodium. We need to elevate and look at the micronutrients, the bioactives, the food synergy, personalization, and leaning to that and take the lead. So that's how you're going to be able to formulate and innovate that's based on the latest science that will actually create products that are healthier. Because right now there's a major mismatch between what's on the label and what the science says. And therefore we're not always, by changing the formulation and the ingredients to match front of pack labeling, we're not always making healthier products. And that's the problem, because there's this mismatch between the requirements in the algorithm and what the science of nutrition says.
Is it possible to defeat that? Working like in different kind of teams integrated, or how
I think
could
it's
it be?
possible. I will acknowledge that you're saying defeat. It's not us versus them. I think we're all part of the same food system,
Yeah.
and we got to work together. So you got to work with people that disagree with you. You've got to do science together, and most importantly, we need a nutrition professional in a position of decision making in industry, because nutrition right now is reactive. It's tick. Let's consult the nutritionist, or let's consult the nutrition professional, but they need to be part of the decision making in the science and in innovation, because they're the closest to what is the science of nutrition and health, and they'll help guide that formulation and innovation that the industry needs to create products that are healthier.
Yeah, to get them really involved in the process, not just a part of it, like a checkpoint, but being all
Because I
around
often
it.
see that. I see that there's often marketing and nutrition, or this tension within the industry, but we need to, all the professionals work together, but nutrition needs to be elevated beyond what it is right now. I've seen many examples in industries, like one of the biggest extra virgin olive oil producers in Australia has a nutrition professional in the board of directors. So that's the kind of, because once you do that, then you have the science, then we did the education. We're not just marketing. You've got to do education, because that's what lasts. That's how you get consumers to trust the science, to trust the products. When you do good science with integrity and you educate and you just don't market products.
And that also will help us to avoid the confusion around many different products, isn't it?
100%. Like, consumers are confused because they're not getting any education. When often with the front of pack labels is choose the one with less labels, choose the one with more stars, choose the one that scores the highest mark. But that's not education, right? We actually need to get to from young children all the way to adults, proper nutrition education that complements the labeling system, that will help them make healthier diets.
And it's also related with education, because they need to learn to identify the ingredients, to read the labels. And how are you planning that it will evolve in the next years?
I think we need the government to support nutrition education from a very young age. It's incredible that food is something that every single human on the planet has to do every day. And nutrition is so important for health. It affects every system in our body. There's not one part of our body, from physical and mental health, that's not affected by nutrition. And it's not just the macronutrients and sodium. It's the micronutrients, it's the bioactives. So we need to get government support, but industry can also do education as well. The whole food system needs education, because if we can slowly start educating from very young children, then they grow up knowing how to read labels, they know how to choose foods, they know the effect of food on health, they have the context of food as well. They know that some foods we have less often than others, but still enjoy it without that guilt from that reductionist approach that we have today.
Do you identify a specific country or a region that you think that are doing well in that situation?
I think in terms of labeling and products, not really. It's the same. Every single label, every single country in the world looks at macronutrients and sodium. It's unbelievable. What I've identified is that in the US, researchers are using what's called Food Compass 2.0. So it's not a regulatory labeling, but it's used for research, which is to come up with a score based on more than 50 different markers that takes into account the micronutrients, the bioactives, the food structure, even fermentation. So it's really based on the science. And they've shown that the higher the score, the better the health outcomes. They've actually done science associated with health. So I think perhaps a way to start leaning into that complexity of food and labeling is to look at some of those examples like Food Compass that's used in research that we could potentially use in front of pack labeling, with education though.
Yeah,
which
that's
is
important.
We can't just market products. You've got to educate as well.
Now that you said fermentation, I want to know if there's a specific ingredient as something promising for the future.
I think all the micronutrients, I talked about how we have multiple micronutrient shortfalls globally, in Australia, in New Zealand, in the USA, in Latin America, Caribbean, and Harvard also published recently more than 15 micronutrient shortfalls globally. It's a huge silent health crisis. So if you were to choose which ingredient is going to have the most health impact, start with micronutrients. and there's lots of innovation. There's, for example, seaweed that is very high in calcium that you can use to fortify with a whole food ingredient, or mushrooms exposed to UV. There's vitamin D as well, which you can use as ingredient fortification that then has all that whole food. The other a potential formulation is to include some of the bioactives, the non-nutrients, what we call today, but they're very important. They're anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, neuroprotective, cardioprotective, cholesterol lowering. So one example might be beta-glucans. Traditionally, we use oats, as a source of beta-glucans, but there's also yeast that are high in beta-glucans. So there's a lot of, just look at the micronutrients, look at the bioactives, but also consider the whole food matrix, because there's something in that as well that science shows that is quite beneficial. So keeping as much of the integrity of the whole food in some cases is also very important.
Yeah, then we have to study not just the ingredient, but how it interacts with the different components of the formulation.
Yeah, and it's a concept that's more than 20 years old now, the food matrix. Dairy is a great example. There's been a lot of research on the food matrix that we know when we look at dairy and we look at just at the saturated fat, the health effect we see in the science is not what you would predict. That's because of the matrix. There is the way that the fat is structured, the other nutrients that help with the absorption of calcium, it all interacts. So we need to start using that science, elevating it, because the food matrix is a concept that we know, it exists, but we're not really leveraging the fact that the food matrix does play a big role on the effect of food on our health.
And taking it to the consumers, how can we translate all of this science and messages into something that they can understand and really take to their own lives?
I think it's not that hard to translate science. I'm a science communicator. I work with quite a few science translators. The problem often that I see is when people translate science, they try to say it all. You don't have to say it all, right? I think with consumers, it's what they can relate to in terms of the food. You keep it simple. You say what needs to be said, and then the rest can be done through education. But consumers want that simple message. They want to know, how is it going to affect me? How is it going to affect my family? We can do it. It's possible. Just don't try to do it all. Focus on one key message at a time, but as part of an education program. Right?
Only short and simple.
Short and simple. Don't try to say 99% like a lot of academics do. Just say what you need to say, and the rest you can say later.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of trends, do you identify something that is going to help to the labeling in the years to come, like blockchain or personalized labels? I don't know, something
I think
like that.
a big, and I talked about this, a big opportunity for industry is in personalized nutrition, in nutrigenetics. We already have products that are based on our genes, like gluten-free, lactose-free.
Yeah.
We even have legislation that's based on our genetics, like the warning label that contains phenylalanine is because of a common genetic, not common, but a genetic variant that exists where people have phenylketonuria, the inability to break down phenylalanine. And we already have legislation on pack with warning. So it already exists, but science has moved on so much more on the personalized nutrition. So there's a huge opportunity for industry to create those products that are more tailored to those that perhaps snack more, those that don't absorb the vitamin D as well, those that need more vitamin C, more bioavailable. There's lots of opportunities in personalized nutrition from a genetic perspective because we already have it. Mm-hmm. Products already exist. We don't think about it, but they do. And we can move on to the next era, along with the micronutrients and bioactives and food structure and synergy that are important.
There's a lot of research to do about it. But for end of this conversation, what can you tell us about the labeling direct to the children? Do we need some changes about it? Do we have to be more cautious about it?
I think for children, 100%, we've got to be careful of how we communicate food, both positive and negative.
Okay.
Because as I've seen in the FOODiQ School program, when we ask children, what is food to you? Food to them is reductionism and negativity. They say, not too much sugar, don't eat too much. It gives you a tummy ache. Whereas when we ask adults what is food to them, they say it's culture, it's delicious, it's yummy.
Like celebration.
Right? It's a celebration. So food to adults is context, it's positive. food to children, what they're hearing is negativity.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to also be able to communicate food in a positive way, but we also have to protect our children, because if we advertise foods that are less healthy to them more than foods that are healthy, they are going to have a mismatch. It becomes normal growing up that these foods are everyday foods when they're not really everyday foods.
Yeah.
So I think definitely we've got to protect children, but we also have to be positive about food and teach them that all foods have a place in our diet, and empower them with the education to be able to make choices and know what's good for them and what's not.
And to let them enjoy that moment. Of
Exactly,
eating.
without creating guilt, because the relationship that we have with food is the longest relationship we'll ever have.
Yeah.
It starts in utero and it ends when you die, right? So imagine ruining that relationship from a young age, which is what we're doing with that reductionist label, not too much sugar, don't eat this, only eat that. We're ruining, life for the next generation. And I think we can do better. But it's a food system. We are all part of the same food system. So it's not just industry, it's not just public health, it's not just the parents, it's the environment, it's the school, and it's the whole food system that slowly has to change, right?
Well, you said it in a great way. Thank you so
you.
much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you here with us, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks for having me.